You're in a conversation or maybe even a relationship where something just feels off. The words sound polite, but the tone cuts deep. The smile is there, but it doesn't reach the eyes. You walk away from interactions like that, feeling smaller, confused, or even guilty for reasons you can't quite explain. Toxic behavior isn't always loud. It doesn't always show up in obvious forms. In fact, the most dangerous kind is the one that's subtle, the kind that wears charm like a mask, but underneath it, slowly chips away at your confidence, your clarity, and your calm. So the question is, how do you deal with that? Because if we're honest, most of us either explode or go silent. We react, or we retreat. We get pulled into drama or spend days trying to overanalyze something that shouldn't even need that much energy. But smart people, emotionally intelligent people, they do it differently. They've learned that how you respond to toxic behavior says more about your growth than about the other person's dysfunction. This is not about being better than anyone. It's about being better for yourself. It's about showing up with strength, not ego, with strategy, not rage, with strategy, not rage, with peace, not passivity. In this conversation, we're going to unpack what clever, grounded people do when they face toxic behavior, because the goal isn't just to survive it. The goal is to rise above it without letting it steal your voice, your values, or your vision. Let's talk about what that actually looks like. It's easy to reflect what we absorb. Someone speaks to us with sarcasm, and we answer with the same edge. Someone raises their voice, and we instinctively raise ours. Someone lies to us, betrays us, dismisses us, and something inside of us says, fine. I'll show you how that feels. But clever people, smart people, they don't mirror toxic behavior. They master it. They don't let the actions of someone else determine the direction of their own character. Because here's the thing, every time someone acts out of insecurity, control, or manipulation, they're not inviting you into a conversation. They're inviting you into a cycle of reactivity, a cycle of back and forth, a cycle that keeps the emotional fire going just long enough to exhaust your energy. And the moment you step in to match their energy, you've already lost control of yours. Toxic people thrive in chaos. They rely on you reacting just like them so they can justify their behavior. Buttons. They make accusations. They create tension, not always loudly, but strategically. And they wait for you to break character. But clever people understand something different. They know that dignity isn't proven by how loud you are, it's preserved by how little you allow someone to pull you out of your peace. They've learned how to pause, how to breathe, how to assess the moment and ask, what outcome am I actually contributing to if I go there with them? And that's what makes them effective. Not because they're passive, but because they're disciplined. They understand that not everything deserves a reaction, and just because someone is provoking you doesn't mean you owe them a response. They lead with self-control. They stay rooted when others spiral. They can be in the presence of immaturity and still respond with clarity. It's not about being soft. It's about being strong enough to not let someone else's storm create your atmosphere. See, the moment you react just like them, it blurs the lines. You lose the distinction. And suddenly it becomes less about what they did and more about how you responded. That's the trap. That's why clever people refuse to mirror toxic behavior. Because if they do, they've made someone else's dysfunction their compass. And nothing productive, nothing powerful, nothing meaningful is ever built from that place. I'm not saying it's easy. When someone disrespects you, your instinct is to defend. When someone accuses you, your instinct is to prove. But smart people pause before they pounce. They ask themselves, do I want to be right? Or do I want to remain aligned with who I say I am? Sometimes not engaging is the highest form of emotional intelligence. Sometimes silence speaks louder than snapping back. Sometimes walking away says more than winning the argument. It's not about letting people walk all over you. It's about choosing your response with intentionality, not emotion. And here's the truth most people miss. You don't owe everyone access to your energy. You don't have to be pulled into every drama, every argument, every slight. You can stand firm, speak once, and let the silence carry the weight of your maturity. Smart people know that when you refuse to mirror toxicity, you become a mirror of strength. You reflect back something different, something disarming, and in that difference, you shift the dynamic. When someone expects you to match their sarcasm, and you respond with calmness, it confuses the script. When someone sends you a passive-aggressive message and you don't respond, it interrupts the loop. When you choose grace over ego, clarity over chaos, peace over performance, you're doing more than reacting. You're leading. Not every fight is yours to fight. Not every insult needs a comeback. Not every conversation deserves closure. Sometimes the most clever thing you can do is protect your peace by not engaging at all. And you'll find something interesting happens over time. People who used to provoke you won't enjoy your presence anymore. Not because you're rude, but because you've stopped feeding the dynamic that gave them control. You've stopped mirroring. You've started mastering. You don't let their insecurity become your identity. You don't let their chaos become your compass. You don't let their volume determine your values. And maybe most importantly, you don't let their behavior write your story, because you know who you are. You know the weight of your words. You know the value of your energy. And that's what gives you strength. Not the need to win the argument, but the wisdom to know you don't need to attend every invitation to dysfunction. So let them throw shade. Let them spin their narratives. Let them misunderstand your calm for weakness. You don't need to match their tone to make your point, because when you rise above it, you already have. There's a moment, quiet but defining, when you realize that staying in certain spaces is costing you more than leaving ever could. Smart people recognize that moment. They don't always make a dramatic exit or give a long speech. Sometimes they just step back, quietly, intentionally, because they've learned something that most people struggle to accept. When respect is gone, there's nothing left to negotiate. See, we spend so much of our energy trying to fix things that are fundamentally broken. We explain ourselves over and over. We lower our standards just to keep the peace. The peace. We bend, then break, trying to avoid being misunderstood. But clever people understand that no amount of compromise will ever restore what someone refuses to honor. Respect is the foundation. Without it, everything else, communication, trust, collaboration, love, it all starts to crumble. And when you find yourself constantly defending your boundaries, constantly questioning your worth, constantly shrinking just to fit into someone else's version of acceptable, that's not humility. They're not entitled, but they are clear. Clear on what they stand for. Clear on what they deserve. Clear on what they will no longer entertain just to be liked or tolerated. They know that walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing yourself over a cycle that no longer serves your growth. Keep your growth. The word you mean, it's not that they don't feel the pull. It's not that they're immune to the guilt, the doubt, or the fear of being labeled too sensitive or too much. But they've lived long enough, learned hard enough, and paid dearly enough to know the difference between hard work and harmful patterns. Harmful patterns. And when someone consistently disregards your voice, your value, or your vulnerability, that's no longer a relationship. That's an erosion. And the smartest thing you can do in that moment is protect your dignity, not prolong the dysfunction. You'd be amazed how many people stay in situations simply because they don't want to look like they gave up. But here's the truth. There is a kind of strength that comes from knowing when something is beneath the standard of who you are becoming. Coming. Clever people walk away, not because they're cold, but because they've finally warmed up to their own worth. They've realized that the longer they stay in toxic dynamics, the more it shapes their view of themselves, the more it normalizes disrespect, the more it chips away at their confidence. And no relationship, no job, no connection is worth losing yourself over. Some people won't see your value until you remove your presence. Some situations won't reveal how toxic they were until you breathe fresh air again. And sometimes the most courageous act of love is leaving, so you can stop proving yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. But that decision takes clarity. It takes discipline. And it takes a deep trust in your ability to rebuild on your own terms. Smart people don't make these decisions impulsively. They've tried the conversations. They've done the reflection. They've held out hope that maybe, just maybe, the other person would meet them halfway. But when the pattern is clear, when the respect is consistently absent, they don't try to change the other person. They change their own direction. It's not easy. In fact, it's incredibly difficult. But there's power in reclaiming your space. There's power in choosing peace over performance. There's power in walking away without needing anyone else's permission. Because the goal isn't to win the argument. The goal is to win back your peace, your self-respect, your emotional clarity. We don't get stronger by tolerating more pain. We get stronger by becoming more selective about what we allow to shape us. So when someone shows you, repeatedly, that they will not meet you with respect, let them go, not with anger. not with revenge, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their energy is a privilege, not a punishment. You don't need to announce your boundaries. You don't need to argue your exit. You don't need to explain your silence. You just need to know your worth and act like it. And sometimes acting like it means taking the hardest step of all, the one that leads away from what was comfortable but unworthy. The smart ones don't look back, not because they've hardened their heart, but because they've opened their eyes. They've seen what happens when you stay too long in a space that no longer honors your presence. They felt the drain, the dull ache of compromise, the slow fade of joy. And they've learned, once and for all, that walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom, it's maturity, it's freedom. And most of all, it's peace. There's something powerful that happens when someone decides to stop explaining themselves, when they no longer feel the need to justify their boundaries, when they realize that peace doesn't require permission. Smart people understand this. They don't set boundaries to be difficult or dramatic. They set boundaries because they've learned the cost of not having them. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They're guidelines that teach others how to engage with you respectfully. And clever, emotionally intelligent people know that the absence of boundaries doesn't make you more compassionate. It just makes you more available to be drained. You see, toxic behavior often thrives in places where there are no limits. People test you, push you, see how far they can go. And if you keep allowing it, not because you're weak, but because you're trying to be the bigger person or keep the peace, you teach them that your time, energy, and well-being are negotiable. But smart people, they've figured out that protecting your peace is not selfish. It's responsible. It's responsible. It's adult. It's leadership. They've learned to say no without guilt, to say that doesn't work for me without panic, to exit conversations, environments, and even relationships when those things constantly dishonor their values. It's not easy at first, especially if you were raised to be accommodating, agreeable, or always available. Saying no can feel like a confrontation, but it's not. It's a clarification. Think about it. In any healthy relationship, both parties understand the rhythm. There's mutual respect. Space is allowed. Rest is honored. Rest is honored. But toxic dynamics don't respect rhythm. They drain. They demand. They thrive on access. And clever people start asking, "But why am I always the one adjusting?" That's when things change. That's when the line gets drawn. You don't need to explain why you won't respond to that text at 11 p.m. It's text at 11 p.m. You don't need to justify why you're not attending that event or taking that call or continuing that conversation. You don't even need to be angry to enforce a boundary. You just need to be clear. Smart people don't make a big scene about it. They just make a decision. They let their consistency speak louder than confrontation. And guess what? Some people will not like it. Some will call you selfish. Others will say you've changed. That's okay, because you have. You've grown. You've outgrown situations that expect your availability but never offer you accountability. That kind of shift is uncomfortable, especially when you start with people who are used to crossing your lines without consequence. But discomfort isn't a reason to abandon boundaries. It's a sign they're working. I've seen people who let guilt override their gut. They say yes when everything inside them says no. They accommodate toxic behavior to avoid friction, and over time, they begin to feel resentful, not just of others, but of themselves, for betraying their own standards. For betraying their own standards. But clever people, the ones who have learned the hard way, they flip the script. They start protecting their schedule, their mental space, their emotional bandwidth. They learn to distinguish between being kind and being available to abuse. And once you taste the freedom that comes from setting boundaries without apology, you stop negotiating with people who benefit from your silence. That's when your energy shifts. That's when clarity returns. You become more focused, more grounded, more grounded. You show up more fully for the people and priorities that actually matter, because you're not constantly recovering from what drained you. See, boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about letting the right ones in. The ones who respect your time, your values, your limits. The winots. And the ones who don't? They'll fall away naturally. You won't need to push them out. The presence of strong boundaries does that work for you. It's not easy. It takes courage. It takes self-respect. But over time, you'll start to realize that the people who truly care about you never make you feel bad for taking care of yourself. You'll realize that the peace you protect today is the clarity you'll carry into every room tomorrow. So if you're still wondering whether it's okay to say no, to draw the line, to stop giving chances to patterns that hurt you, let me say this. Yes, it's okay. You don't need to apologize for the space you need to grow. You don't need to defend your decision to stop tolerating what drains you. The only apology would be continuing to abandon yourself for the comfort of people who never plan to change. Strong boundaries don't push people away. They simply show you who's willing to meet you with respect. And once you realize that, you'll never go back to shrinking just to keep someone else comfortable. Because peace isn't found in pleasing everyone, it's found in honoring yourself. That's not selfish. That's smart. We've all been there. Someone says something rude, passive aggressive, maybe even cruel. They poke at your peace, twist your words, throw their own chaos at your calm, and for a moment, everything inside you wants to react. You want to prove a point. Fire back. Defend yourself. Maybe even take them down a peg. But here's what I've learned about truly smart people, the ones who live with clarity and lead with strength. They don't give their energy away that easily. They don't let emotional turbulence drag them into a reaction. They respond, not from their feelings, but from their principles. There's a difference. A reaction is immediate. It's fueled by ego, fear, insecurity, or the need to be right. But a response, a real response, is thoughtful. It's strategic. It's not about winning the moment. It's about protecting the long game. Toxic people thrive on reactions. They feed off drama, confusion, defensiveness. They want your buttons pushed because it gives them control. But smart people, the emotionally intelligent ones, they recognize that giving someone else control of their peace is a cost they're no longer willing to pay. And so, they pause. They breathe. They create space between the trigger and the response. Because in that space lies your power, the ability to choose how you want to show up. Not how you feel in the moment, but how you want to be remembered long after that moment has passed. This doesn't mean they're passive. It doesn't mean they let things slide. It simply means they've mastered the ability to say, just because you're acting small doesn't mean I have to shrink too. And that takes discipline. It takes humility. But it's one of the most clever, courageous things you can do, because responding with wisdom disarms toxicity. Toxicity. It neutralizes chaos, and more than anything else, it protects your integrity. I remember someone once asked me, but if I don't defend myself, won't they think they've won? And I said, if they think they've won and you've kept your peace, your energy, your dignity, maybe you actually did. See, toxic behavior is loud, but wisdom is steady. Emotion says, a fire back now. Wisdom says, a breathe, think, choose. Emotion tries to match energy. Wisdom sets the temperature. And the most amazing thing happens when you stop reacting to toxic people. They lose interest. They can't manipulate what doesn't move. They can't control what doesn't respond. And you start to notice, it was never about you anyway. It was always about their unhealed stuff showing up in your direction. So instead of taking it personally, smart people take it professionally. Not as in wearing a suit, but in the sense of managing their emotional environment with the same care and strategy that a leader manages a team. They understand that everything doesn't deserve a response, especially not a reaction. There's a quote I love. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Sometimes wisdom is knowing when to speak. Sometimes it's knowing when to walk away. And sometimes it's knowing that silence can be louder than shouting. We live in a world that moves fast and reacts faster. Outrage is trendy. Responses are public. Screenshots are currency. But the smartest people I've ever known? They're calm, measured. They understand that composure isn't weakness. It's intelligence under pressure. So the next time someone tries to bait you into a reaction, try this. Pause. Think. Ask yourself, is this conversation moving me closer to who I want to become? Or is it pulling me back into who I've already outgrown? That one question alone can change everything. Because responding with wisdom doesn't just protect you from others, it protects you from yourself. From the version of you that wants to fight every battle, win every debate, prove every point. And the truth is, you don't have to. You're allowed to be calm in the storm. You're allowed to choose peace over pride. That's not soft. That's smart. And the smartest people don't react to noise. They move with intention. They protect their peace like it's the most valuable thing they own, because it is. So choose to respond. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. That's how real strength sounds. That's how smart wins. We live in a world where people often mistake silence for weakness, kindness for softness, and boundaries for betrayal. But the truth is, it takes far more strength to stay calm when provoked than to snap back. It takes more intelligence to set boundaries than to keep pretending everything's okay. And it takes real courage to walk away. Not in anger, but in self-respect. Clever people don't waste time trying to fix what someone else refuses to own. They don't trade their peace for the illusion of being accepted. They don't mirror toxic behavior just to prove a point. Instead, they lead with intention. They observe, not absorb. They choose clarity over chaos. And most of all, they make decisions that align with who they are becoming, not who they're trying to please. Because at the end of the day, how you respond to toxicity isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about defining yourself. So if you're in a space right now where someone's behavior is making you question your worth, let this be your reminder: you are not obligated to shrink to make someone else feel comfortable. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You're here to be aligned with yourself. And you are not powerless in the face of toxicity. You're just one decision away from peace. Smart people don't just survive toxic behavior. They outgrow it. They outsmart it. And most importantly, they outlive it. Outlive it. We live in a world where people often mistake silence for weakness, kindness for softness, and boundaries for betrayal. But the truth is, it takes far more strength to stay calm when provoked than to snap back. It takes more intelligence to set boundaries than to keep pretending everything's okay. And it takes real courage to walk away. Not in anger, but in self-respect. Clever people don't waste time trying to fix what someone else refuses to own. They don't trade their peace for the illusion of being accepted. They don't mirror toxic behavior just to prove a point. Instead, they lead with intention. They observe, not absorb. They choose clarity over chaos. And most of all, they make decisions that align with who they are becoming, not who they're trying to please. Because at the end of the day, how you respond to toxicity isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about defining yourself. So if you're in a space right now where someone's behavior is making you question your worth, let this be your reminder: you are not obligated to shrink to make someone else feel comfortable. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You're here to be aligned with yourself. And you are not powerless in the face of toxicity. You're just one decision away from peace. Smart people don't just survive toxic behavior. They outgrow it. They outsmart it. And most importantly, they outlive it. Outlive it.